My mom always said that it was rude to talk with your mouth full, but I got a lot to say, and I think I got to just start with my mouth full. Okay, so here we go. Yesterday, we found out that Nate Saint and Ed McCulley spotted the Alka village. Now, would these four families decide to go to the Alkas even though they were dangerous? Why, yes, they would. Yeah, happy they were willing to do it for Jesus. And they were willing to do it because they wanted to see everybody get saved, no matter how dangerous they were. But how were they going to convince the Alkas that they were friendly? Well, I'll tell you what. Nate Saint's sister, Rachel Saint, was also a missionary. And she was a missionary in a different part of the jungle where an Alka woman had come out of the jungle and was living with her. So they knew that they could go and visit this Alka woman named Diuma, and they could learn all about the Alkas. Yeah, that's good. Okay. And they could learn maybe different Alka phrases from her and different things to say. And so they thought this was going to be perfect. But this was the problem. They had to keep this all hush-hush and real quiet-like because there were people who knew that the Alkas were savages, and they wanted to find out where the Alkas lived because they wanted to kill all of them. So these missionaries said, we got to keep this real quiet-like. And so the good thing was that Rachel Saint was actually away at a conference. And so they decided this is the perfect time to go visit Diuma. And so Jim Elliot walked 5 hours through the jungle to go see Diuma, and he wrote down every single thing that she said in Alka because she had learned the Quechua language too. So he talked to her in Quechua, and then he would learn Alka words and phrases from her and what they meant, and he was writing them down on flashcards, and then he'd turn the flashcard around and he'd write it in English, where they know what it meant. Now, he told these things to all the other families. They were always radioing each other and sending letters to each other and going visiting each other. And they started to call their little plan here Operation Alka. They were going to reach those Alka Indians with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Now, Nate Saint, remember when we said that he was a pretty crazy pilot? He was real good. He figured out this way. Just hold on a second. Get this with me. Okay. He would fly the plane around in circles like this. Okay? Real tight circles. And then from the plane, he would drop a rope with a bucket on the end. Now, the rope was also spinning in circles like this, but the bucket would stay in one spot. If I saw that, I would say that's some kind of magic you got going on there because that is crazy. And so he was able to drop stuff all the way to the ground while he's going in circles in the plane. And so they figured, what if we put stuff in the bucket to give as gifts to the Alka Indians? They were going to give them gifts and start showing them like, hey, we're nice, we're friendly people. Look, we're giving you gifts, we're nice. Well, Nate and Ed were the first ones to go up in the plane to do their very first gift drop, and it was a success. They dropped that bucket right where the Alka Indians were, and they gave them things like brightly colored ribbons and brightly colored buttons, like the buttons you have on your shirts, and then they gave them a tea kettle that they could warm up hot water in, and they gave them salt, you know, like you put on your food, that kind of salt that every once in a while I lick my finger and I lick a little bit more because I like salt, and then Mr. Paducah doesn't like when I do that. Okay, I know, Moji, it's okay. Yeah, Mr. Paducah doesn't like it when I do that. Okay. Anyway, in the following weeks, they did more and more and more gift drops. And while they were doing these gift drops, sometimes Jim would go up in the plane with Nate. And all of these Alka phrases and words that he had learned from Diuma, he would shout them out the window using a speaker, like a loudspeaker, so that the Indians could hear. And he would say things, I mean, this was in Alka, but if you were to say it in English, it was things like, hello, we're friendly, come and visit us, we're nice people. It was things like that, so that they would know, hey, not only are we giving you gifts, but we're telling you, hey, we're nice, don't be afraid of us, and please don't kill us. Now, one of the gift drops, something real cool happened. They were dropping the bucket, and all of the Alkas knew by now when they saw that yellow bird in the sky and they saw that bucket coming down, they all came over because they knew there were presents. And so they were pulling stuff out of the bucket, and then Jim saw one of them put something in the bucket. He pulled it up real fast, and inside the bucket was a really cool headdress that they had made with parrot feathers. And they thought, this is great. Now they're giving us gifts back. We're giving them gifts. They're giving us gifts back. They must like us. This is wonderful. But Jim remembered what Diuma had told him, which was that be careful and never trust an Alka Indian, because just when they seem like they're being friendly, they'll turn around and kill you. So Jim knew that this was still a dangerous situation, but he was hoping that after doing this so many times that the Alkas would get it, that they were friendly. The plan was really coming together now, and Jim and Betty prayed, and they prayed and they prayed. They prayed to God that God would save these Alkas, that he would allow them to tell them about Jesus. Now, at this time, they recruited another missionary. So they had 5 missionary families that were involved, and 5 men that were going to first go and try and make contact with the Alkas. And I'll tell you who they are. The one that they had join them was this one on the end, Roger Udarian. He was another missionary in the jungles of Ecuador, and he was a real tough guy. They knew that he was a good guy to bring onto their Operation Alka team. The second one there, that's Pete Fleming. And the one right in the middle, well, we know that guy, that's Jim Elliot. Then the next one, that's the guy that flies the yellow plane, Nate Saint. And the one here on the end, that's Ed McCulley. Those were the 5 men that said, we are going to go and we are going to tell the Alkas about Jesus. Right? My little mochi moo. Oh, I'm sorry. I told him I wouldn't say that anymore. It's okay. Shh. Mochi's mad at me. Now, the day finally came where the men were going to go land the plane on a beach that was right near the Alka village. And the men were so excited, and their wives were so excited, but they knew it was still dangerous. And so Jim and Betty walked out to the airplane together. Jim kissed Betty goodbye. He gave his little daughter Valerie a big hug. She was about a year old at that time. And he got on the plane, and they flew away. Now, the men landed on that beach, and they decided to call it Palm Beach because it was full of palm trees. And they began building their campsite. They even built a tree house that they could sleep in at night so that they would be away from all the critters on the ground and even the jaguars. Now, while Nate and Pete were going and getting some more supplies, they flew over the Alka village and were telling them, hey, we're at Palm Beach. Come visit us. They went to sleep that night, and none of them could barely sleep a wink because they were so excited. And they were really hot because they were in the jungle. Now, after 2 long days of waiting on the beach, all of a sudden, out from the jungle come 3 Alka Indians. It was 1 man and 2 women. And that's one of the men right there that came out. And that's Nate Saint with him and that yellow plane in the background. That was them when they came and visited them on the beach. And guess what? They had a great time together. They ate together. They were trying to communicate and doing big hand motions and trying to tell each other stuff. Nate Saint even took that man up in his airplane and was flying around. It was amazing. The men were praising God. They were having a good, friendly interaction with the Alkas. They hadn't come and killed them. This was great. And so they radioed to their wives and told their wives the good news, and the wives were praising the Lord Jesus too. So they told the Alkas, come along the next day. Come tomorrow. Go bring all your friends. Well, the next day the Alkas didn't come. But then when Nate and Pete, who had gone to get more supplies in that yellow airplane, were flying back, they saw some Alka Indians walking toward the beach. They landed on the beach real quick, and they told the other men, guess what, you guys? There's Alka Indians on their way. We saw them walking toward the beach. And they were all so excited. They said, oh, yes, and maybe we're going to have the same type of day where we're all going to hang out and we're going to learn more of their language, and then pretty soon we're going to be living with them and telling them about Jesus, and they're going to be reading the Bible, and everybody's going to be saved, and this is going to be the greatest thing ever. Let me just take a drink real quick. Yeah. Now, they told their wives, we're going to radio you an update at 4:30, so be waiting. So Betty and all the other wives were waiting by their radios for their husbands to radio them at 4:30. 4:30 came, then 4:45, then 5, then 5:30. And pretty soon, it was time for Betty to put Valerie to bed and her to go to bed herself. And they thought, well, maybe the man just got real distracted. You know, if the Alka Indians were there, they were talking and they were doing stuff, and they totally forgot to send us a radio message at 4:30. But by the next morning, nobody had heard from the man. And so a missionary pilot decided that he was going to take a plane and fly over the area to see what was going on. And when he came back, he didn't have such great news. He said, I didn't see any of the men, but I did see the airplane on the beach, and it had been ripped to pieces. Now everybody started to get real concerned, and the wives were praying and praying. And so the U.S. military actually came, and they created a rescue team to go and find these men, and other missionaries joined them. So they went out to Palm Beach, and they came back, and a man from the U.S. military called Major Nuremberg had the hard task of sitting all the wives down and telling them that there had been an Alka attack, and none of the men had survived. All 5 men had died. And he told them that they had to take their bodies and bury them there at Palm Beach. Now, as Betty heard this news, in her mind came a Bible verse that she had memorized, and I'm going to read it to you. Isaiah 43, 1 and 2. It says, fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. When you walk through fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you. Betty knew that in the most painful, darkest moment of her life, that God was going to be with her. But there was something else she knew. She knew that her husband, Jim, loved God and loved other people. He loved other people so much that Jim was willing to sacrifice his own life so that these savage Indians could hear about Jesus and be saved. He was willing to sacrifice everything. But Jim also knew that even if the Alka Indians killed him, that because he had turned from his sins and put his trust in Jesus, that he would go and be in heaven with God. The God that he loved so much. The God who would say to Jim when he entered his kingdom, "Well done, good and faithful servant," because Jim had done exactly what God had asked him to do. Now Betty and all of the other wives and all of their children were mourning over the loss of their husbands and their daddies. But even then, the wives prayed and thanked God that they knew exactly where their husbands were, in heaven with God. But what was Betty going to do now? Would she stay in the jungle by herself with her little 1-year-old daughter, Valerie? Would she go back to the United States to be with her family now that her husband was gone? Could she still be a missionary without him? These were hard questions for Betty. But she knelt down on her knees and she prayed a prayer that even she didn't understand. She said, "God, if you want me to go to the Alkas and tell them about Jesus, I will go." What? She was still willing to tell the Alkas about Jesus even though they had just killed her husband and the other 4 missionary men? Only God can do something like that in somebody's heart and mind. And I'll tell you, every single one of you young people, that all of the adults that are here, including myself and Mr. Paducah and Mochi too, we all want you guys to love Jesus just as much as these men and these missionary women. Every single one of you. And we hope that you do. Well, I'm sorry, you guys. I know that this ends today on a real tough note. A real sad one. But you know what? Tomorrow we're going to find out what God does with the rest of Betty's life. What she's going to do. What big things she's going to do for God.